I'm Jeff Bezos.
Do you think that billionaires should exist?
Yeah, I think it's great. People have worked extremely hard and they've done something exceptional for the world.
Kylie Jenner has become the youngest self-made billionaire of all time.
Self-made. Oh, I love that phrase. Come on, there's no such thing.
First initial startup capital for Amazon.com came primarily from my parents.
Anyone who tells you to follow your passion is already rich.
The idea that hard work equals more money isn't just a myth, it's propaganda.
Hustlers don't sleep. We nap.
Individualism in America is not just looking out for number one, it's punching down others to be number one.
I'm sorry, but the American dream never fucking existed. Like what, your dream is to work until you are 65 and decrepit and not be able to make ends meet the entire time?
It's gonna get to the point to where unless you're rich, you're not gonna be able to afford in a house.
There's no jobs. All the listings are fake. Jobs don't even offer healthcare. The American dream is dead. And then they tell you you're not working hard enough.
In Western culture, there's nothing we love seeing more than people who've made it. The heroic story of a lone wolf up against the odds, pulling themselves up by the bootstraps, and carving out their own path to success. That's the American dream, right? That anyone can find prosperity with enough hard work and sheer determination. And the best part, even you can do it too. It's a love story of individualism that's stitched into the fabric of America's identity. From the garage startups that turn into tech empires to the rags to riches Hollywood stars, we cling to this hope that in a parasitic capitalist world, with enough grit, you can build the life of your dreams. The problem is, however, we already feel that promise unraveling in the face of a faltering job market, runaway inflation, and an unpredictable future. But most importantly, the promise may have never been real in the first place. Because the hustle narrative isn't just a false hope, it's a tool, a way to convince people to grind harder while funneling the rewards upward, constantly skimming more and more of the cream in prosperity's pot for the few at the top, and leaving less and less for everyone else.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
So today we're going to dissect the self-made trope and discuss why we may have less control over our destiny than we were led to believe. So first things first, we need to discuss where this idea of being self-made came from before we go ahead and dissect it. Because being self-made is a relatively modern idea, as for the majority of human history, we needed to rely on community and collaboration to survive. So the phrase self-made man was first credited to the politician Henry Clay, who used it in a 1932 Senate speech to praise men who rose through their own efforts, contrasting them with those born into privilege. Around the same time, another phrase we often link with this mindset, bootstrapping, also grew in popularity. Because boots back then weren't the boots that we have today. They were actually so stiff and difficult to put on that the rich used mechanical devices to do it. But funny enough, when people first started using bootstrapping, it wasn't motivational at all. In fact, it was used sarcastically to describe something that's impossible. In 1834, for example, a newspaper mocked a man's claim of inventing a perpetual motion machine by saying it's as ridiculous as trying to lift himself up by his own boots. And it wasn't until the late 1800s that the meaning shifted into taking on the self-reliance tone that we're familiar with today, as Americans began using bootstraps as a metaphor for working hard and succeeding without help. But the reason we saw the rise in phrases that reflect this rags to riches ideology is that it matched the zeitgeist: expansion, self-reliance, and starting from scratch. Think pioneers, westward expansion, and homesteading. America was a land of endless opportunity where rugged individuals could carve out their own path as long as they were willing to put in the work. But while a lot has changed since the 1800s, the sentiment held on because it aligns so deeply with America's culture of every man for themselves individualism. From the moment they broke away from the grasp of the British Empire, America was founded on the spirit of doing it yourself. And with that being the backbone of the country's history, claiming the title of self-made has been elevated to the highest accomplishment you could achieve. That's how we ended up today with things like the Forbes list of the richest self-made billionaires, 30 under 30, and the ever-present I came from nothing origin stories and speeches, all positioned as a living proof that the American dream is still alive and well. There is a fundamental flaw in this ideology, however, which is that being self-made isn't really possible, simply because we all rely on some kind of support in life. From the road workers to the teachers, the healthcare workers, and also our parents raising us, there's always someone that you needed to get where you are today. And even if we haven't gone through the process of thinking through and dismantling this idea, we've all kind of gotten that feeling before, right? Like when Kylie Jenner was announced the youngest self-made billionaire, we all collectively raised an eyebrow in suspicion. Because she isn't self-made, is she? Sure, she started her own company, but also she didn't start from nothing. She had the financial capital from being on a reality show during her youth. She also had the connections from her already successful family members and the security of a wealthy family to allow her to take those risks. Another factor to take note of is that this idea of being self-made often overlooks the traditional systems that are holding people back. Credit scores being a big one, because you need credit to get access to the tools to help you build credit, but if you don't have any, then you're basically out of luck. It's a lot like today's job market where companies ask you for 5 years of experience for an entry-level position, but how can you gain any of that experience if you can't even get in the door? The traditional credit system works the same way. Access plays a huge role into your success, because if you don't have credit, it's extremely hard to build it. I've experienced this firsthand as well. When Josh and I started dating, he didn't have a credit card because he didn't need one. That meant that we had to start from scratch building his credit from the ground up. The problem is that not everyone has access to the resources you need to do this. Things like a $200 deposit for a secured credit card or a family member who can add you as an authorized user on their credit card. Unfortunately, this is the reality for a lot of people, as today over 100 million people in the US lack reliable access to fair credit. And it's even harder for the younger generations as they aren't hitting the traditional milestones that build credit. Gen Z is paying from their checking accounts, renting longer than any generation before, choosing gig and freelance work, and often putting off getting their driver's license and buying cars. While there's nothing wrong with these decisions, it does mean that they can be unintentionally limiting access to financial opportunities. The point being, traditional credit systems haven't evolved fast enough to match how people earn and spend money today. And honestly, that gap can be extremely frustrating, especially when you know that you're good with money, but a number or lack thereof on a report says otherwise. But that's exactly why I'm excited to share today's sponsor, Tilt. Unlike traditional lenders that approve you based solely on your credit score, Tilt recognizes your financial readiness in a smarter way, looking at over 250 real signals of how you actually earn, spend, and save. It's money that moves at your speed, not at your credit history. With Tilt, access to fair credit expands because instead of shutting you out, they find an offer that matches what you can reliably pay back and grow with. And when you do, Tilt rewards that progress with larger lines and stronger offers over time. Tilt is trusted by over 5 million customers, backed by a 4.8 App Store rating, and has over 450,000 5-star reviews. So whether you're in a pinch and need a no-interest cash advance, want to build credit with a flexible line of credit, or are looking for a cashback credit card, Tilt makes sure that you have the tools that actually fit the way that you live and work today. It's about time that credit systems catch up with the way that people actually live and earn today, and Tilt is leading that change. So if you want to learn more, head to the link in my description or go on tilt.com today. But resources and institutional systems aside, there's also the simple fact that these people claiming to be self-made through growing a business still require people to make it possible. Like Jeffrey Bezos, one of the world's richest men, he wouldn't get to enjoy his immense wealth without the hundreds of thousands of employees that allow the business to run. Nobody achieves anything without the help of others. Whoever claims otherwise is simply thankless and unaware of how many times they unknowingly or ungratefully were helped on their journey. These kind of people are those who stain and distort what being self-made really is, the sum of our choices, not the trumpeting of our victories as we crushed everybody on our way to the top and ignoring or exploiting those who facilitated our climb. Such a bad look. Surface level stupidity exemplified.
I saw somebody say there's no corporate ladder, you're just stepping on other people on your way up. Toxic individualism means we see ourselves in competition with other people. So not only do I have to succeed, I have to make sure that you fail, or I feel that I cannot succeed unless I make sure that you fail. Toxic individualism irreparably damages the way that we relate to other people and denies us the access to what good could come from having a collaborative culture instead of a competitive one.
Point being, the self-made ideology completely negates the influence of our environment and the opportunities presented to us by others. The reality is, none of us can build anything from scratch. Someone always has to put in effort and resources for us to pull from in order to make our mark. Because it's not enough in our capitalist society to just profit off of others' work and claim it as our own. No, we must ever expand and optimize that productivity by extracting every morsel of profit out of people at the worker's expense. So here's the other thing with the self-made movement. It's rooted in working hard to get your bag, and that's part of the reason why we love it, because it's virtuous and makes for a good story. But there's a slight issue, being that working hard doesn't really matter. The truth is, capitalism doesn't care about how hard you work. I know we hate to hear it, though we know it's true. And yet it always comes up when someone stumbles upon a pile of money and insists, I worked hard for this.
I get up at 6 a.m. I spend about 5 to 6 hours filming video content. I'm in meetings from 12 to 5. I literally just finished work and it's 5:19. Try being an influencer for a day. Try it.
But even though influencers don't work harder than teachers or paramedics, if you went by paychecks alone, you would think that it's the hardest job on the planet. But we still cling to this game of hustling endlessly for scraps, all while ignoring how the game actually works. In reality, a lot of the top paying jobs are a joke when you look at the effort required.
No, because like this industry, it's hard. It's difficult.
And it's something we're familiar with from a young age, like when our parents told us to clean our rooms as kids, but one of your siblings claimed to be the manager so they didn't have to do any of the work. Apparently, they trained us young in the capitalist hierarchy. Consider the average American job now, a good one, a professional one, a managerial one, the few that are left. What does the work really consist of? It isn't about creating things of genuine value, improving people's lives, and expanding anyone's possibilities, really. It is about maximizing profits and minimizing costs, relentlessly every day, week, quarter, finding new and innovative and creative ways to do it. So if working hard doesn't work, then what does? Well, as it turns out, capitalism really just cares about productivity and exploitation. Productivity in that if you do more, you're likely to produce more, right? That's how we found ourselves in the gig economy, where everyone has a side hustle trying to make ends meet, because working harder at one job doesn't matter. You have to earn more by monetizing your hobbies, picking up shifts on the weekend, or becoming an influencer as of recent years. The gig economy is also so popular because in our individualistic society, side hustles carry the promise of a personal escape from the system straight to success. The idea behind all of it being that if you're coordinated enough, you can bootstrap your way out of two jobs and ultimately into achievement. In truth, however, the side hustle life isn't all it's cracked up to be. Because as much as Uber wants to sell you on the allure of individualism by being an independent contractor, making your own hours and working for your own money, the reality is that they're just finding ways to avoid giving you health benefits, job security, disability coverage, and a pension. The urban legends of side hustling at its worst included one Lyft driver who continued to pick up riders after she went into labor, then lifted herself to the hospital to give birth. You can't make excuses and money. Which is it going to be? And this segues perfectly into the next priority of capitalism, which is exploitation. Because capitalism doesn't care about fairness, time invested, or effort exuded. It cares about the end product and the final numbers. And so to win, you need to exploit. Capitalism promised Americans that if they just worked hard and long enough, which means if they exploited themselves and everyone else enough, then one day they would join the ranks of the bourgeoisie. Americans happily consented to that bargain, only to discover that, just as with most things in life, which seemed to be true, that it was a Faustian one. Capitalism's promise that if you exploit yourself and everyone else, fortune will shower down on you, it turned out to be a con game. What really trickled downwards was exploitation, not riches.
Capitalism is the notion that someone can achieve infinite growth in a finite system. In medical terms, we call that cancer.
And so the game is sell the public on working harder, all while quietly exploiting them for their own gain. In order for companies to do good for their shareholders and maximize profit, they must optimize the output of workers. That looks like working them overtime and making them disposable.
Today, my boss went around asking everybody, like, just to get an idea, just to help us out, how many hours we feel like we have to work from home after work, or like how much work we're actually taking home, like how much do you feel like you can't get done during the day so you have to take it home. Someone was like, I was up till midnight last night working on blah 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 just to meet the deadline. Someone else was like, oh, I at least work, you know, like a few hours after work, or I always have to take at least an hour home. Then it came down to me, babe. She was like, Lauren, what percentage of your time spent at home is spent working? I looked this woman dead in the eyes and I said 0. If I can't get it done here, it'll get done tomorrow or the next day. Does everybody work after work?
Who is exploited in America? The better question is, who isn't? 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 70% can't raise $1,000 for an emergency fund. Kids perform active drills. Abuse is rife in industry after industry. Sick people crowdfund basic medicines. The really sick people have to choose between chemotherapy and paying their mortgage. Students pay higher interest rates than hedge funds, the very ones who looted their parents' mortgages and savings. To use another person's vulnerability for one's own benefit, isn't that what all those things really are? Exploitation isn't the exception in America, it's the rule. Over the decades, the American dream has been crushed by a shrinking middle class through draining their savings and leaving people broke and desperate. The truth is that the money was never going to trickle down like we were told when the capitalist is never satisfied. And that's the reality of how you end up with one epic billionaire and thousands of workers living under the poverty line. Not because of one's hard work, but from extracting every ounce of value out of workers for the lowest possible cost. Now that's the ultimate winner. So this conversation about being self-made wouldn't be complete without discussing rich people propaganda. What I mean by that is I feel like everywhere you go for advice on how to get ahead financially, you often are just fed bad or false information. You don't have to look very hard on the interweb to find a millionaire telling you that they built their fortune by waking up at 5 a.m., meditating, and journaling, as if that's the key to success. Like, I don't want to say that those practices didn't help, but just think about how many people do that exact routine and aren't millionaires. Something just isn't adding up with the advice. What's actually happening here is that they're selling you on the lifestyle they live instead of what they really did to get there. I've complained about the 5 a.m. morning routines before, but I want to say again that waking up at 5 a.m. doesn't gain you any more hours than waking up at 7 a.m. if it means that you have to go to bed at 9 p.m. Sure, some people do work better in the morning, and that probably works for them, but some people don't. I know personally sometimes I'll put in a few hours of work at night before bed because I find that if I break up my work, sometimes I do better with a fresher mindset, I guess, rather than pounding out a 10-hour workday. Does that make sense? Maybe it will for some of you, and maybe it won't, and that's kind of the point. Just because these millionaire habits work for these people doesn't mean that they work for everyone. But the other problem with this bad advice is that they all boil it down to you not working hard enough, which, as we found out, isn't the answer.
I was grinding, bro. One year I went 260 days without going home.
Working harder than everyone else, reading a book a week, and not wasting your money on takeout coffee is not the cause of your success, it's just a correlation.
Starbucks is not the reason you can't afford a house. If you cut out a $5 latte every day, in a year you'd save $1,825. You can't buy a house with that, but you could buy something cooler than coffee.
And a lot of the time, these wellness routines come from people who already are in the position to control their time and have the resources to make that schedule possible. For the regular person, waking up at 5 a.m. before their corporate job isn't going to change their life. It's just going to make them tired.
5 a.m.
Do you wake up at 5?
Running.
Wow. I'm up at 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I meant 5 a.m. is my second run. 3 a.m.
Right.
First run.
Right, there you go. First run. And then straight into trading.
Ice bath.
While I'm in an ice bath.
Ice bath.
Just made 100K.
Easy.
Trading.
Done.
So why do we keep getting this advice then? Well, for two reasons, because it makes us feel good and it feels attainable. When the bar to entry is so low that anyone with an alarm clock can join in, it extends the reach of who you can sell to. Because not everyone everyone has access to what's really required to succeed at their level, like a trust fund to kickstart a business. Yes, that is the best example I could come up with because I also don't know how to become a millionaire, but I know damn well that it's not the morning routine. But these 10-step programs give people a sense of control in a world where they're already 2 steps behind. It's hope packaged in a magic checklist that in reality will probably just distract you from the more important steps you need to take that are actually applicable to the thing you're trying to achieve. And on top of that, the people who've made it don't actually want to share how they did it. They'd rather keep that information for themselves and kick down the ladder they used to climb up by giving us useless advice. And you know how we know that? It's because they need us at the bottom. Their whole business plan wouldn't work unless there were middle and lower class people supporting them. So there's no real incentive to help others become self-made besides selling a couple of finance books. In fact, many wealthy people didn't even start from nothing. As a casual reminder, 60% of all wealth in America is inherited. Like, don't tell me that Mark Zuckerberg found his success by waking up early and working harder. No, he came from a upper middle class background with enough financial stability to leave Harvard, relied on his parents and early investors, and could focus entirely on coding and scaling Facebook without needing a paycheck. But that doesn't fit easily into a 10-step guide to success, does it? Okay, I want to move away from the rich and famous though, because it's more important to talk about how the system as a whole is holding back the everyday person from achieving the American dream. As fun as it is to make fun of rich people, most of us just want to live a regular life with a regular amount of success and stability. And as it turns out, that's really hard to do in 2025. And no matter what other people might say, it's not a made-up complaint by Gen Z. It's a hard fact that newer generations are struggling.
The American dream is dead. The average home in the United States costs $418,000. Do you know anyone making that much money? Do you know anyone? Do you know anyone that started a business that's not drop shipping or like some sort of AI gig economy? Like, do you know anyone that owns a store? Do you know anyone that our age that owns a house that did not get help from their parents? There's no jobs. All the listings are fake. Jobs don't even offer healthcare. Like, make it make sense to me.
In 1940, a child born into an American household had a 92% chance of making more money than her parents. But a child born in the 1980s has just a 50% of surpassing their parents' income. And as we know, it only went downhill from there. So to start, let's look at the time period with the most hope and dreams, the 1960s. This was the era of the baby boomers, who ended up being the wealthiest generation in history. Their claim to fame came from a few things, including entering a booming workforce post-World War II. Between 1946 and 1973, the US GDP grew an average rate of 3.8% annually, which created an abundance of job opportunities. And along with all those jobs, the American lifestyle was affordable as well. The average cost of housing was $17,000, which was only 3 times the average salary of $5,600. But as the decades rolled on, prosperity began to shrink. Corporate wealth increased and incomes stagnated, which led to a substantial increase in the wealth gap. As we approached the 21st century, American incomes pretty much flatlined despite their productivity, aka profit, skyrocketing. Now, if we look at buying housing with our modern wages, they just haven't kept up, because the average income in 2025 is $63,000 per year, but the average house is $430,000, jumping up from 3 times the salary to 7 times.
Derek, can you tell the class what you just told me?
How much would minimum wage need to be today to match the home buying power of boomers getting minimum wage in the 1970s?
My guess was $35. Okay, what's the answer?
$66.
That is diabolical.
As house prices have continued to increase and the gap between house prices and earnings has grown larger, the cost of homeownership has become increasingly prohibitive. Whereas in the mid-1990s, low and middle income households could afford a first-time buyer deposit after saving for around 3 years, today it takes the same households 20 years to save for a deposit. Many have increasingly found themselves with little choice but to rent privately. And this is something that's been talked about so much that at this point, it just sounds delusional when a boomer says that they had it just as hard, but they worked harder than the kids these days. On that note, I do want to clear the air for a second because I feel like the conversation of affordability has turned into a battle of who worked harder. And I don't know why we can't all agree that everyone worked hard, okay? Like it doesn't matter what generation you were born into, it's the circumstances that shifted the generational outcomes. Yes, there will always be lazy and unproductive people in society, but human nature is to work, create, and build, and that doesn't change generation to generation. The difference here is the opportunities presented to people in their lifetime, and currently, the opportunities are running dry. Between the weakening job market, stagnant salaries, inflated house pricing, and the AI overlords telling us that we have a few years max before they take over, it's not a fun time to try and be self-made. Unfortunately, future generations are unlikely ever to experience the same skill and luck combination to build wealth as baby boomers. Between high tuition costs and debt, skyrocketing home prices and interest rates, and the decline in employer pensions, the things that helped baby boomers grow their wealth significantly aren't available anymore. This reminds me back when we lived at our old rental, and my landlord, which I will preface was not a very nice person, but he gave me his whole bootstrapping story of how when he came to Vancouver, he only had the backpack on his back and the shoes on his feet and, quote, look at the wealth I've created. And let me tell you, the delusion was deafening because I would absolutely love nothing more than to try and see him do that in 2025, but I digress. The point of this all is that when the cards aren't in your favor, it's not even a question of whether you can pull up your bootstraps or not, because you don't have the same resources or tools to do so. This is why millennials and Gen Z get so defensive about hitting milestones like buying homes, because they literally have to save for decades even to buy a rundown 60-year-old studio apartment. And I'm not saying that Gen Z has been dealt the hardest hand in history, but to say that they're just not trying hard enough is a false claim. As far as economic conditions go, it really is the luck of the draw for what you're going to get, and if the timing is right, you can have a massive payout. But if you missed your shot or were born at the wrong time, then you're just SOL. And the most depressing part of it all is that this all was kind of intentional in a way. Like once the ball got rolling, nobody stopped it. You see, housing before the 1960s wasn't an investment, it was just where you live. But when the 70s came around, inflation hit and house prices soared. This turned homes into primary assets and something to be protected from economic downturns. But what does that mean for everybody else? As John Stuart Mill wrote back in 1848, if some of us grow rich in our sleep, where do you think that wealth is coming from? It doesn't materialize out of thin air. It doesn't come without costing someone, another human being. It comes from the fruit of others' labors, which they don't receive. And so for people to maintain their newfound investments, house prices had to increase, lest a whole generation loses their wealth. At the core of American housing policy is a secret hiding in plain sight. Homeownership works for some, but it cannot work for all. If we want to make housing affordable for everyone, then it needs to be cheap and widely available. And if we want that housing to act as a wealth-building vehicle, home values have to increase significantly over time. How do we ensure that housing is both appreciating in value for homeowners, but cheap enough for all would-be homeowners to buy in? We can't. We just saw this recently when Mark Carney was running for Prime Minister, and his promise was affordable housing. We all love to hear it, but didn't give a plan of how he was going to do that until after he got elected. No hate. I feel like I'm bashing him right now. But it wasn't until when he was in office that it was revealed that he's not planning on lowering house prices because that would destroy multiple generations' wealth.
And making sure we're building enough supply and that the federal government is focused on affordable housing, delivering that. No, I think that we need to deliver more supply.
But I think the plan was that housing needs to stay at a stagnant price so that over time wages catch up to it.
The core issue for younger Canadians, for all Canadians, is that the level of house prices goes down relative to their incomes. So the affordability goes up.
I don't know what the solution is, but that's pretty sad for anyone who's like looking to buy a house, you know, that you have to wait 20 years to buy in because everyone else got their riches off of it. But it does make me feel better that this isn't necessarily our fault. Like, it's not my bad that I didn't invest my birthday money when I was 10 and buy a condo. This is just how it was always going to be. But the implications of this is that it isn't just any investment that's lost to the youth. It's the basic human need of shelter that's been turned into a retirement plan at the expense of future generations. I guess it is what it is. And it's not great, but it goes to show that boomers being the wealthiest generation was just luck. Being born in an era where the workforce emphasizes job security, pension plans, and wage growth, and having the place you live become your main asset works out well for a population, funny enough. And it also wasn't calculated planning that got them there. Almost 40% of boomer wealth was created by purchasing and increasing home value. It's just the reality of the situation that they had a lot to gain coming of age during the second half of the 20th century. And one can only wish that the tides get turned in Gen Z's favor as it did for the boomers. Okay, final thoughts. Okay, so first of all, I want to say hard work still matters. It just isn't the cornerstone of success. Also, individual achievement still deserves recognition. I'm not trying to dismiss people here. We're just talking about the reality of the situation and that these things don't operate in a vacuum. But like I said, I find a lot of peace knowing that all of this is just the hand we've been dealt, and we just have to take advantage of the opportunities that do arrive and have the willingness to work with what we have. But the other thing that makes me feel better about it all is that this was such a small pocket of time, the 1960s era, where you could build yourself up and become self-made. Like prior to that, horrors. After that, a lot of horrors. So it's not like that's necessarily the standard for humanity. Well, that's what we want the standard to be, but that's not how the history of humanity has gone up until that point. The prosperity of the 60s was really only for straight white males. So it's not even like I want to go back there and live a life where I'm a trad wife and I don't get a credit card and I don't have my own bank account. Like now technically is the best time to be a woman. So that helps me sleep at night anyways. I think it's important to acknowledge topics that we talked about today, like the things in the past, how we got here, but then leave it be and have a forward mindset because we do still have some unique opportunities today. It's not the ideal situation, but I don't know, I guess we're not helpless, but there are a lot of things that we miss out on, like the luxury of working a 9-to-5 to buy a detached house. But I think the point we should pull from all of this is that we aren't actually supposed to be making it on our own. We are creatures who thrive on community, and maybe this is just more incentive to get back to that. But you tell me what you think. That is all I have for today. Make sure you check out my merch. All the proceeds go to the SA Foundation so you can help other people who are struggling in this economy. And also make sure you subscribe if you haven't and you get more fun topics like this. Bye.
Who you surround yourself with is who you become, so I like to keep my circle small. That's why I don't spend time with my kids, because they're not innovators. They're not hustlers. They're not making moves.
And then you see them, they're like, let's read a story, let's play catch, or you come into my piano recital, and it's like, do you have a business plan? I'm by the hour.